All right. So we need to deal with a major topic in order to handle its opposite. Prophecy. What is prophecy in Judaism? In Judaism, we're not talking about the Oracle of Delphi here. This is not reading tea leaves or palms or tarot cards or anything. We're talking prophecy, which is a specific Jewish concept. What is it? Foretelling the future is part of prophecy, but it isn't actually the central piece of prophecy. All right, so let's back it up. Rather than what is it, what does it do? What's the function of prophecy? Why have prophecy in Judaism?
Theoretically, it directs your behavior to a certain end.
All right, so the prophet is trying to influence the people, right? So that they will, we hope, do God's good. Right? Do the good that God wants them to do, to experience the good that God wants them to experience. That's what God is all about. I mean, we have the beginning of this week's Torah portion, see, I've set before you a choice of good and bad. Pick good. And the prophet is there to help the people make that. But what makes a prophet rather than just a rabbi or a teacher or a parent or anyone else who wants good for someone else that tries to give them instructions, pointers, and tips? What component are we missing? I'm giving a hint vertically over the prophet here.
I'm just thinking the prophet gives them information about what will happen if they don't follow.
All right, often
God's
conditional information, exactly.
Right.
If you continue to reject God, ...
Right.
bad will happen. If you turn to God, ... good will happen. Most of the prophecies are in fact conditional, which is why predicting the future is not exactly the litmus test of a prophet. One of the most famous prophets that most people know of their whole prophecy is the prophet Jonah, because we read him on Mincha afternoon for Yom Kippur. We get the beginning, the middle, and the end of his prophetic career, at least the written part that we have. And he makes a prediction that doesn't come true. He says the town of Nineveh city is going to be destroyed, and then it doesn't, because the people change what they're doing, and so God doesn't destroy the city. Well, his prediction of the future was wrong, but his instruction from God was correct. So his conditional prediction was okay. And that brings in the element I am trying to get here, which is God. God inspires, guides, gives the words, gives the instructions to the prophet, and then the prophet passes that on, which is what is going to set a prophet apart from the rest of us who are doing the best we can to make sense of God's law and how to live in this world in a godly way. So the prophet is uniquely equipped to provide insights into our world, and uniquely gifted with a vision, literally, of what the future holds, which is why he is now speaking, or she. There are both male and female prophets in Jewish law and Jewish tradition. And that gift then means their words carry special weight, right? A prophet is speaking with God behind their words, as opposed to the rest of us who are doing the best we can, and hopefully we are drawing from God's words, but we're drawing from books and we're drawing from our teachers. We're not drawing from the well directly. And that means when a prophet speaks, the people are obligated to listen to their words. Now, what's the problem here? As let's call it a sociological, a political, authority issue here.
What if it's a false prophet?
What if it's a false prophet? The part that makes a prophet real is this link between God and the prophet. And the part that makes the prophet real is exactly the part that we cannot experience, or else we would all be prophets. So how do we know that when the prophet says, God told me to do such and such, God actually did it? There's no way for us to share that experience, or like I said, we would all be prophets. So how do we check to know that this is true, so that we know that this is true, his instructions, so that we know that this is true, that we actually are doing what God wants? That is the subject of our class. What do you do with false prophets? How do you know them? And why does it matter? Make sense? Good. We are on chapter 13 of the book of Deuteronomy. And we're going to start right up at the top. And as you can see, we are using our additional commentators text to try and dig deep into this topic. We're not going to read everything on the page, don't worry. I'll be selecting, however, if your wandering eyes happen to come across a particular commentary that I haven't pointed out, and you would like to say, wait a minute, what is this person talking about? Or wait, I really like the way so-and-so says this. Please pipe in and add them into the mix. Okay, but I do need a volunteer. We're going to read the Torah parts first, and we're going to read the Torah more contiguously. We're going to read it in a block, and then we're going to go back and use the commentaries to help us. But we need to get the arc first.
So where would we?
So we're going to start up on page chapter 13 with the NJPS, the New Jewish Publication Society translation, where it says, "Be careful." And then when you hit the word "sign," we're going over to the next page of a port. Exactly, that's where it flips.
Be careful to observe only that which I enjoin upon you, neither add to it nor take away from it.
All right, a topic I believe it was either last year or the year before that we went into more detail on, of what does it mean to add or take away from the Torah. And then keep going.
If there appears among you a prophet or a dream diviner.
All right, pause real quick. So the connection for this chapter and why the chapter break was put here was the idea that a prophet potentially is going to instruct you in a way that might add or subtract from what's happening around you. And that's going to need a test before that happens. So you got this prophet or a dream diviner, someone who dreams the dream. Keep going.
And he gives you a sign or a portent, saying, let us follow and worship another God, whom you have not experienced. Even if the sign or portent that he named to you comes true, do not heed the words of that prophet or that dream diviner. For the Lord your God is testing you to see whether you really love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul. Follow none but the Lord your God, and revere none but him. Observe his commandments alone.
And flip.
And then I flip.
And heed.
And heed only his orders, worship none but him, and hold fast to him. As for that prophet or dream diviner, he shall be put to death, for he urged disloyalty to the Lord your God, who freed you from the land of Egypt, and who redeemed you from the house of bondage, to make you stray from the path that the Lord your God commanded you to follow. Thus you will sweep out evil from your midst.
Okay, so back to chapter 13 to start. Questions? Problems? Issues? Let's get them on the board before we start finding answers to them in our commentaries.
Is prophet and dream diviner interchangeable in this case?
All right. Are they the same or not? Very good. Any other questions? Problems?
Well, normally a dream diviner tells you about the future,
Mm-hmm.
what your dream theoretically portends.
True. So they could be the same, or they could have some distinction.
I don't see them as being exactly the same, but the end result is the same.
Well, I guess part of the issue would be coming down to, is there a difference in the manner in which they are having information revealed to them, right? Does a dream diviner get information in the same way as a prophet? And is there information of similar importance between the two of them? Any ideas?
My gut feeling is that they would not be the same, but I don't have any rationale.
Well,
The dreamer, they dream.
Right.
no, a dream,
But a prophet is getting something from God.
right, the
I don't
dream
think the dreamer
designer,
is. Go ahead.
I'm sorry,
No, that's okay. You speak.
I'm surrounded by stripes, I just noticed.
And you're not even in prison.
Your whipple in.
Yeah.
A dream diviner deals with what someone else has told him about their dream.
Mm-hmm.
A prophet gives you God's words.
Okay, so let me just push back a little bit on this.
Yeah,
Who is the most famous example of a dream diviner?
Joseph.
Exactly. And do you not think that what Joseph divined was from God? Joseph certainly thought so and even said so.
Yeah.
So, also with the prophet, many of our sages say that the prophets did not experience God, except for Moses, as a face-to-face contact, as a waking conversation, but they too were in visions or in dreams, that they experienced what God was revealing to them. So I don't know that we need to make too much of a distinction here between the two categories, but functionally they are serving the same purpose, which is they are claiming that what they know, which no one else has access to, is what God wants the people to know and then do. And so the Torah is rightly concerned that we check what they do. And what's the check that the Torah seems to be setting up for them? That's in the end of that verse 2. All right, if there appears among you a prophet or a dream diviner, and he gives you a sign or a portent. Right, so a sign or a portent. What in the world is a sign or a portent?
Omen.
An omen, something out there. So what would convince you that this person's on the up and up? If I tell you in 1 minute that clock is going to have the hand 1 notch forward, are you going to believe that God has inspired me, therefore, to reveal this information, and anything else I say is, yeah, no, not so much.
No.
The sun will rise tomorrow. No?
But if the sun was shining and the prophet said, in 1 second it's going to start to hail, I might have second thoughts about.
Unless you lived in Florida, where the weather can change like that.
It had not hailed in 100 years or something.
Okay, so a sign or a portent seems to be some form of prediction about what's going to happen that would seem to reveal that they had special insight, special information that was not available to the rest. Let's take a look at Rashi. So we're in the Rashi block under the big 13, and it says, he gives you a sign, as the bold letters. They're on the front page of the packet. Does everyone see where we are?
Yeah.
Be careful to observe.
Go further down till you reach the number 2.
Oh, okay, I see.
Right.
He gives you a sign in the heavens. Let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate day from night. They shall serve as signs.
Okay, so what Rashi's doing here is saying, what's the difference between signs and portents? Why would the Torah bother to use 2 words when it could have just used one or the other? Because signs are a particular location of prediction. So these signs are signs about what's going to happen in the sky. There's going to be an eclipse. There will be a comet. There will be a something with the moon. That a sign, because of the usage of the word sign in the creation story, must have to do with the heavens above, as opposed to a portent. Keep reading.
On the earth, like the one Gideon asked for, let the fleece alone be dry, while there is dew all over the ground. Do not heed him in either case. And if you are wondering why God gave a person like this, that, like that, the power to do such a thing, see verse 4.
Which we are going to get to, because that's going to be one of the biggest questions we've got. But so see what Rashi did. He says signs and portents. Signs mean up there. Portents mean down here. And in neither case do you listen to them, depending upon what comes next.
So it depends upon what comes next.
And that's the verse 3 part, right? So, but what Rashi's trying to do is, by saying sign and portent, he's using the phrase as being a, what is it, a memorism? My English lit teacher would be very unhappy. The A to Z, heaven and earth, and anything in between. It doesn't matter what kind of prediction they make, what kind of sign they make. This warning covers everything. Does that make sense? So he's not just trying to tell you literally what sign means and literally what portent means, and that they're just based upon their location. He's trying to say it doesn't matter what kind of symbol they're providing. Don't buy any of it unless, and then that's going to be our ...
You don't buy it until you see it.
No, the seeing it is a precondition, right? So that actually was covered in another section dealing with false prophets, where if a prophet makes a prediction and it doesn't come true, then you automatically know that's a false prophet, right? If I say there's going to be a hailstorm and nothing happens, then I'm in trouble because I said God told me there was going to be a hailstorm and then there wasn't. So false prophets who are wrong are automatically excluded and are obviously false prophets. This is dealing with false prophets that are right. Oh boy, right? There will be a hailstorm. God told me so. Boom, hail. Ta-da! Right? That's pretty impressive. And what Rashi's trying to say is that what we are about to use as a way to judge a prophet, other than the accuracy of their prediction, matters regardless of the type of prediction they use to prove their credentials. Because you might think somebody who made a prediction about something on earth, that's not so impressive, but if they made a prediction about something in the heavens, that's a macher, right? The same way you were trying to decide between prophet or dreamer, maybe one is more powerful or more worthy of respect and obedience. No, everybody is going to be subject to this rule no matter what trick they're using to prove what they're doing. And actually that word trick, don't use too literally. It's going to come back to be debated in a second. Okay? Okay. So if we then have a problem, if we are talking about the person who's given a false prophet giving signs and portents, and Rashi has hinted at this, and that problem is, how can a false prophet make a true prediction? I mean, he gave a sign or portent. The Torah says that he was right. How do we reconcile that? If you look on the second page, take a look at the Rashbam. That's the top right-hand column.
Yes. Oh, okay.
Where it says 13:3.
Even if the sign or portent that he named to you comes true.
Right? We don't follow him, even if it comes true. Why not?
Because the diviner happens to know the future by means of an unclean spirit, magic images, ghosts, or familiar spirits.
We believe in ghosts and familiar spirits.
Oh, isn't that a fun question? Isn't that a fun question?
Oh, come on.
So how does Rashbam solve this problem of a false prophet in quotes, who claims he got the information from God, and his information proved true regarding whatever sign or portent he was giving? How do we solve that, even though we know he's false? What's Rashbam's explanation? I'm not asking if you buy his explanation. What does Rashbam say?
For the Lord your God is
No. Well, give me the paraphrase. Malka was already incredulous halfway through it. I need to make sure we say it clearly. Rashbam says he got it from some other unclean source. Spirits, ghosts, something else out there. And I see not a lot of love for that answer. Do we believe in these other forces that operate in the world that sorcerers and necromancers and other people can access?
I didn't think we did. But we believe in angels.
Well, the angels is a slightly different
Right.
issue, but
But one is the opposite of angels.
not necessarily.
Okay.
I know emotionally it can feel that way, but in terms of the taxonomy of ethereal creatures, if you're trying to create like an animal kingdom out of the unseen world, they're not exactly polar opposites in how they are understood. So when you say, do we believe in these other things? We is a very big word. So there is a substantial portion of Jewish tradition that absolutely believed that there were malignant forces operating in the world, not in the demonic fallen angel sense, but just there are stuff out there that hurt people, and that they have knowledge because they are able to go wherever they want to go. And if you learn how to control them, you could get knowledge from them, but we don't do that, and we shouldn't do that. And that's why a bad prophet might be someone who was hanging out with those things. So it's considered almost like natural forces that are malignant as opposed to benign natural forces. There are others who do see the idea of ghosts as being a possibility, meaning that the recently departed, because they have passed beyond the veil of this world, have a perspective that transcends our own. And if one were to communicate with them, then they would be able to share their insights. And that could be useful if you were trying to predict the future.
So if somebody says, I had a dream last night that my
Relative talk,
deceased
right,
aunt came to me in this dream and spoke to me.
right.
Is that necessarily bad?
It's not necessarily bad unless you are trying to use it for the reasons that are being used here, right? So what's the part that is neatly sandwiched between he gave you a sign important and it came true but still don't believe him? What was the prophet's instruction that made us immediately disqualify him? And that's that part of verse 3, right? Let us follow and worship another God. As soon as those words come out of the prophet's mouth, it doesn't matter how many signs and wonders he's done. As soon as that happens, you know that he is not from God. But we're still stuck with this problem that what he said happened, that he made a sign or wonder. So the Torah is trying to clarify why not to follow him. And the rabbis are trying to understand, our sages, why the Torah puts it in this language. And Rashbam's simplest explanation is, okay, he got the information from some source that we don't like. But not everyone buys there are these other sources that we don't like. There is a large portion of our tradition that doesn't go in for the ghosts and unclean spirits and other things like that. So we have to come up with another reason of why he might have been right, and yet we still don't believe him. For that, flip back to our first page. I'm going to take a look at Ibn Ezra. Upper right-hand column, it says 13:2. If there appears among you a prophet.
Among you, because a prophet would have to be an Israelite.
Right, so he's just pointing out why they say if there appears a prophet among you. Why not just say if there appears a prophet? This is why, because we're talking about an Israelite prophet, because I erased it. We're talking about the connection to Adonai, to our God. So that's the only person we're really dealing with right here. Keep going.
What connects this with the preceding chapter is, of course, idolatry, which is what burning their sons and daughters was for.
The very end of chapter 12 talks about people who would put their children into the furnace as a way of sacrificing them to a false god. And this is saying, it doesn't even matter if a prophet tells you to do this. It's wrong. Keep going.
The person described here is not a real prophet, but is merely called so to indicate that he claims that the Lord or his emissary spoke with him, whether in a waking state or in a dream.
All right, so Ibn Ezra is drawing our attention and then rebuking it, that just because the Torah calls this person a prophet doesn't mean they are a legitimate prophet. Right? Just because they got the title doesn't mean they get all of the honor due to that title. They're a prophet in how they are claiming to behave, even though they're not really a prophet in the sense of having a connection with God. Make sense? He just wants to clear it up in case anyone thought, well, hey, they called him a prophet. No, not like that. And now keep going. So we have to still work out how this person can be accurate if they're not really a prophet.
Some say that this prophet could perhaps be one of the prophets who steal my words from one another.
The prophets who steal my words, steal the words of God from each other. What does that mean? Keep going.
This would mean that a real prophet announced a sign that would confirm his words, but someone who heard him say so also announced the sign as if it were his own.
All right, so a real prophet says tomorrow there was going to be a comet in the sky, and a false prophet hears the prediction, knows that that guy's legit, goes over to another town and says, hear me people, tomorrow there will be a comet in the sky. And everyone, when the comet comes out, says, wow, he was right. He was right because he copied. Right? It's like looking at the other kid's test page. You're copying the answers, and then you're getting credit, and everyone thinks you're a genius, or in this case, a prophet. So Ibn Ezra is saying, how could it be that a false prophet might be right? He might have been eavesdropping. He's just passing off the prophecies of others as his own. That's one explanation. Carry on.
Still others think that even if the prophet's sign should occur, he is not to be believed, since after all, what he is proposing defies reason.
All right. Ibn Ezra then advances, even if we can't come up with a good explanation of how this prophet was right, of why he was able to predict what he predicted, we still automatically don't follow him, because what he is asking us to do, the worship of a God other than Adonai, defies reason. I mean, simply by making that claim, we should follow another God, it doesn't matter how right he is. He's already discredited himself by saying something so preposterous. Make sense? Is it so preposterous, though? Or has our nation often had a problem with thinking, hey, new God on the street, why not?
Well, we didn't have immediate internet access in those days.
No, we didn't.
So if the false prophet went to another town,
Right?
it could be days or weeks before the message came back.
If ever, exactly.
So how the average person in the street would not necessarily understand.
Exactly.
this false prophet.
So I'm just going to recreate our little image here a little bit. Nation and good. All right, so we have God talking to the prophet talking to the nation does good. That was our little diagram in the beginning. So what the Torah and our commentators have said is, on the one hand, you can question this by checking the signs and portents. All right, so you can check that. Is it correct or is it not? And that's your first test. And if it's not, then he's automatically disqualified as being a true prophet, and we don't have to listen to anything else he says. Secondarily, however, if this checks out, his sign or portent was right, we can come up with some reasons of why he might have been right, even though it didn't come from God, that it might have come from, a bad source, as Rashbam says, or from some other prophet that he's passing off as his own, as even Ezra said. And because we as the nation can't tell what's happening here, we end up having to check here, which is, what is he proposing? And if what he is proposing are idols, then this doesn't matter. And this doesn't matter because we know this doesn't fit that. Idols and God don't go together, no matter how many wonders and signs you give. And so what the Torah is proposing here is a rational litmus test for a prophet, rather than a sign or wonder which is inherently going to be ambiguous to the rest of us who are not gifted with prophetic insight. But we all have enough of a brain to check what he says, of whether or not what it says fundamentally contradicts God. So this is really an amazing section of the Torah, that it is saying signs and wonders are great, absolutely, and in some circumstances these are going to establish these people as prophets, like Isaiah, like Ezekiel, like Jeremiah, like lots of other of our famous prophets, and they are going to be amazing people who will help guide your community. Yes, it's wonderful. But you know what else is wonderful? The fact that you can use your brain to spot the bad ones like that, no matter what they are able to do in signs in Wonderland. That's even more amazing, says the Torah. Is all you have to do is use your sechel and say, would God have told us to worship another God? Right? And the end of the day, God tends to make a pretty big deal that we don't worship other gods.
We've had quite a few false prophets.
Oh, haven't we though?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And so that then comes into, if this is so obvious that, like Ibn Ezra is saying, and the Torah is implying, that if they're telling us to worship something other than God, then why did we keep falling for it? Right? I mean, you can't tell me that it was just because they did fancy signs and wonders, because this should have disqualified them immediately. All right. So now we got to get to some other commentary to try and figure this out. So if you are on the first page, still where it says 13 at the top, and you see Nachmanides, also known as Ramban, he's that giant block in the middle of the page, right? He likes writing.
Nachmanides
Yes.
is Ramban.
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 With an N at the end, yes.
Because we have family with the name Nachmanides.
That's Yichus. That's a really good family tree.
Yeah.
Right. So he was a commentator who lived in Spain before the expulsion and then had to leave. But he wrote a very extensive commentary on the whole Torah. Whereas many other of the commentators, as you can see, wrote a couple sentences, maybe. He wrote paragraphs. And so it's a very helpful commentary, because sometimes more is more. And having more explanation can be helpful. So we're going to go down to his final paragraph on this page, where it says the straightforward sense.
The straightforward sense of the text is that this person is a prophet of the particular idolatrous religion he urges you to observe. The idol Peor sent me to you, for he is God, and he commands you to worship him in such and such a way. That is, he is a prophet who speaks in the name of other gods. Okay,
so what Ramban, Nachmanides, is doing here is saying, okay, this text is a little ambiguous. What do we mean when we say false prophet? And so his first answer is on the straightforward level, the surface level of the text. We might be talking about not someone who claims that Adonai, God, has sent him, but is claiming some other God has sent him, right? And in this case, he's saying, like Peor, which was one of the names of the other ancient pagan deities. And that might be the most straightforward way to read the text. Some prophet from some other faith, some other God is showing up and claiming that we should go worship that God. Completely different than our religion. However, keep going.
Such a person is lumped in here with the other false prophets. Rabbinic literature, though, understands this prophet to be someone who is claiming to speak in the name of God. The Lord has sent me to tell you to worship Peor, his partner in creation, or He is the greatest of all the lesser gods, and the Lord wants you to worship him.
Okay, what's the difference?
There's one God.
But what's the difference between a prophet who says, Peor has sent me and told me to go worship, we should all worship him because Peor is God, and another prophet, one hill over making his fiery speech, saying, Adonai has sent me and told me that we should worship Peor because Peor is God's partner in creation, or because Peor is the most important of the other lesser deities. And that's what Adonai wants.
But aren't they both false?
They're both false, but they're false in different ways. And one is more insidious than the other.
One is using God as his source and the other is not.
Exactly. So,
But yeah,
so think for a
there
second.
were enough fools, and there still are.
There still are, but this is it is a very cunning and very deliberate misdirection that is still used to this day. If somebody is trying to persuade you, they are not going to cite a source that they know you already mistrust.
Your mom said it was okay.
But if your mom said it was okay, or the principal said it was okay, or I checked with, Dr. So-and-so, and he said that you can eat all of this you want, now it's much more persuasive. Because after all, the Israelites were loyal to Adonai. They were loyal to God. Loyalty was not always monogamous, however. It's somebody who truly loves their spouse, but still has difficulty remaining only faithful to them, or faithful to only them. And so the idea that, Adonai told me that also he wants you to worship this thing could be much more compelling to the average Israelite than somebody who just says, don't worship Adonai, worship this instead. And indeed, the archaeological evidence supports the rabbinic view, and that Ramban is citing here, that for much of our ancient history, the archaeology reveals that most of the Israelite homes worshipped Adonai and ... other gods. That they were not completely rejecting God from their life, but they were adding other gods into the mix along with Adonai. And that, I think, is what the rabbis are referring to here. And like I said, the archaeology backs that up. You find many, many homes and spots in Israel in the archaeology where people had little placards that were dedicated to Adonai, and then they had little idols that were dedicated to others, and sometimes they even called them couples, God and his wife, basically. And yeah, it's kind of weird for us.
Yes, it is.
And that's because we've had 2,000 more years to get it right. But back then, they were still very much caught up in this idea. Go ahead and finish that paragraph.
The sages insist that even if you said, worship Peor today only, and you will be successful in such and such an endeavor, for that is what the Lord wishes, still he has committed a capital crime. This would seem to be included in the straightforward sense of the text, but the text commands us not to heed a prophet who commands us in the name of the Lord to worship an idol, and to pay no attention to his signs and portents.
Okay, so we're going to pause there. So the basic idea again is, no matter whether this is a just worship him today request, as opposed to worship him all the time, or any other variety of only this guy or this guy plus God, or this guy lower than God, but still worship him. In any case, it's all wrong. But we then come back again to the same question of, why is this allowed to happen? Why is this false prophet allowed to make his false prophecy? And by allowed, I don't mean approved of, but I mean allowed, physically allowed to have this happen. To highlight the allowance part, if you turn to the next page, that's the page that begins with or a portent at the top. And you look in the Ibn Ezra, middle of the right-hand column, and you see the number 4. For the Lord your God is testing you. Marion, if you would do the honors.
By not killing such a prophet.
Right.
but leaving
That's
him
the test.
alone.
So sometimes you have to read the bold letters as part of the sentence.
Okay.
So go ahead
The
from
Lord
4.
your God is testing you by not killing such a prophet, but leaving him alone. Remember that the purpose of God's testing someone is to demonstrate the righteousness of the person being tested.
Okay. So we'll get to the purpose of the test in a moment, but the function of the test is what's so interesting that even Ezra makes clear for us. We are being tested because the prophet doesn't drop dead the moment he opens his mouth. You ever heard the phrase, if I'm telling the truth, if I'm lying, may God strike me down, lightning bolt, da 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 da, as though that's some proof. And what Ibn Ezra is saying is, no, God is not going to throw a lightning bolt or an earthquake or fire or a stampede of wildebeest every time someone acts as a false prophet. Just because someone gets up there and says, Adonai sent me, and I tell you we have to worship this, that, and the other, just because they don't fall over dead doesn't mean you have to give them respect. You can still say this is a false prophet. God is not going to sweep them away from us. That, says Ibn Ezra, is the test. Now, it's an unusual interpretation, especially for us in the modern world, because most of us have gotten used to the idea that evil is not extinguished immediately. We've seen far too much of it persist much longer than most of us would be comfortable, which we've talked about at other times. A more modern read to what the test is happening here is, why was he allowed to be right? Right? Why let him give a sign or wonder that checks out if what he's going to do is against what God wants?
Well, isn't that even true today?
Mhm.
Why does God allow the evilness to exist?
Absolutely. This is a subcategory of that question, right? So the broad question is, why is evil allowed to exist?
Because God doesn't control our actions.
Um,
We control our actions.
or more specifically, God won't control our actions.
Yeah, he
Okay.
Right.
And
It's not that God lacks the ability, but if God controlled our actions, we
Right.
would be like a stone. And God wasn't interested in making human-shaped rocks. He wanted a human spirit that would make choices.
Right.
And
We don't always make the right choices.
no, we don't. And some people make really, really huge, horrific, world-altering choices. And that is part of the test.
It's like with the Holocaust.
Mhm.
Why did God allow this to happen? That's an age-old question that's being asked, to this very day.
It is. But the test is of a unique variety in this case, that when someone comes to persuade you that God has sent them and gives a valid indication that they know something that the rest of us humans don't know,
Mhm.
that they have spiritual insights, that there's a particular type of test that's taking place here. And it's more than just, well, this is a bad person. The question is, will we let ourselves be persuaded by the signs and portents, even if what they are saying is categorically against what we know God wants before the prophet shows up? To see the way that problem cycles through? And that is an amazing test, as Ibn Ezra and the other commentators as well, which I advise you to read in more detail. That's an amazing test because it's asking, do we really love God? Do we love God? Now you might think, if you loved God, someone who could do a wonder in God's name would be the person you would cleave to instantly, right? This is my guy. I mean, look, he is so filled with God's Spirit that he's able to do all of these amazing wonders and signs and knows the future. I met this wonder-working rabbi, somebody or other, and he was able to know that my mother had died of cancer, and all he said I had to do was give him this amount of money, and that would support this. And then, he told me I didn't need to worry about that mitzvah because my spirit was too holy to worry about it, or it was okay to break that commandment because of my special neshama. No! Just because somebody is filled with signs and wonders, we don't cling to them. We cling to God. And the handles that we hold on to, that let us cling to God, is the Torah. That is just such an amazing and profound statement, especially from 3,000 years ago when talking to our ancestors who were delivered from Egypt with signs and wonders, who had seen Moses perform signs and wonders. That was like the way they got convinced, theoretically. And the Torah at the very end, Moses is saying, signs and wonders, they're helpful. And yeah, we're still going to get more of them later. But everything has to go through the check of, does it match what God has actually given you that you can't deny? And that's called Torah. And if you really love God, you'll ignore the miracles and hold on to Torah. And that is just hard to imagine getting that point across. If you love God, you'll ignore the miracles and hold on to Torah instead. Because after all, who wants a book when there are miracles out there, when there are wonders, when somebody is doing magic and signs that are amazing and impressive and clearly indicate that they have insights beyond the understanding of mortal men? Why should I settle for a book? Because that was God's love for us. God gave us the answer key. So no matter what else no matter what else another person is doing, if we love God, we love this more than the signs and wonders. Make sense? Hard? Hard.
Yeah, human nature is taken up by miracles and wonders.
And that is rough. Zichrono Livracha for Gene Wilder, may his memory be a blessing. Have you all seen Frisco Kid?
Yes.
Mhm.
So in the early scene where he is thrown out of the wagon and he is walking along and he comes finally to pick up the Torah, and at that moment where you see his love for the Torah is such a touching piece of cinematography. I mean, it's just, as funny as he is and as hilarious as that movie is altogether, that is what this is about. That you recognize that the most precious gift that you have is this little book that allows us to sort falsehood from truth and allows us to navigate life no matter what flash, whiz, bang, special effects are going on around us, and to keep moving forward. And there will occasionally be real prophets that come along and they'll do signs and wonders that will help us understand our own day and age better. But all the time, we're checking them against the answer key. And if they cross that line, then we can say, I'm sorry, as impressive as your show is, the Torah is more impressive. And the Torah says you're wrong. And I'll choose God over your wonders. And that has been one of the reasons why we have stubbornly remained Jewish, despite our many, many mistakes, despite our many, many problems for 3,000 years, because we've got this and we're not letting go. No matter how fancy the show is, no matter how impressive or undeniable their prophecy may be, if they violate the ideas of this, they're not speaking for God. And we can argue about where they got their information from, but it doesn't matter. This check is more important. The one that says, I've already given you what you need to know. Good? Good.
note that phrase that we read during